Hello, everyone. This is another Freedom to Feel conversation, and my guest today is Dr. Jeff Karp. He's the author of Lit Life Ignition Tools. Use nature's playbook to energize your brain, spark ideas, and ignite action. He's a mentor, a biomedical engineer, professor at Harvard Medical School and MIT, a chair at Brigham in Women's Hospital. Something else that caught my attention, your bio will be the full bio will be at the end of this interview. But you're also the head of innovation at Geoversity, Nature's University, which is a rainforest conservancy located in Panama. That caught my attention. I have lots of questions. I went on the website and started
Yeah.
reading about it. Wow, that's incredible. So you have done so much, and I thanked you before the recording. I want to thank you again for your presence here, for saying yes to me to have this conversation today. So your full bio will be at the end of this video. But a question that I love asking my guests, Jeff, every time I meet them is, how would you describe yourself in this very moment? I know I gave a lot of technicalities, what you have done and all that, but who is Jeff in this very moment?
Yeah, love that question. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be here with you today and for the opportunity and for the amazing question. I would say Jeff, right at this moment, is extraordinarily curious about the world and it also maybe experimenting with various ways of being and highly experimental tinkerer and I would say and sort of evolving towards deeper connections to nature and trying to, I would say also
Right.
a big part of me right now is trying to be more open to the cues that I'm getting from my mind, body, from other people, trying to become more sensitized to intuition and
Yeah.
leading with intuition as well.
Wow. What's not to love about that? And I do have a question about you about intuition in nature. What is the connection that you clearly see between human intuition and nature? Is there one?
Well, I think that it's so hard, I think, to separate ourselves from nature. Although I think there's been this sort of like evolution in our psychology so sort of like a mental construct that we're separate from nature. And I have
Right.
a feeling that a big part of that is because you know thousands of years or even hundreds of years ago, life for most people on the planet was really difficult, and it's kind of like there's so many things that in nature that
Right.
can end your life very quickly, and so there's been this evolution of even just like washing hands and washing off we call germs, but I mean all these
Right.
are living creatures. I think I see life as this it's all about reaching for the energy. The way that I see, for example, trees in the jungle are reaching for the sun, and those that can't get it are just waiting for a tree to fall before they can get up. I just feel like life reaches towards energy, all of life, even humans, and we seek energy in different ways, whether it's from the sun or from
Yes.
each other or from ourselves, from the tools and things that we have created or others have created for us. And so I just feel like, there's this life force that exists everywhere. And the life force, again, it's like, how can you explain how plants can follow the direction of the sun? I mean, to me, that's part of consciousness. And
Right.
I think that Yeah, and for humans, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's this, we've been conditioned to believe that nature is separate from us. And I've been on a path to try to rewire that, really. And one of the ways I try to do that is not only externally, and there's a variety of practices and rituals that I do to connect externally with nature in my environment, but also internally, because I mean, we all have incredibly powerful biology, most of it completely unexplainable at the present moment. I cut my finger a few months ago, put a Band-Aid, pretty severely, put a Band-Aid on it, and a month later it was like perfectly healed. It's I mean, there's a little scar there, but it's amazing, like this powerful biology that we all have. And I think it's important that we take the time to recognize as much as we can and be in awe of what we have and what's around us.
Is there a connection between neurodiversity and trauma? Because I think it has been my case, being traumatized in childhood, how I related to myself in the world in a very different way than most people around me. So
Mm-hmm.
have you actually come across this topic, neurodiversity and trauma?
Yeah, no, it's so interesting you bring it up. I haven't thought about it directly, but now my mind is focused on it.
Yeah.
And I mean, it totally makes sense. I mean, I think to me, neurodiversity is really a mix of genetic differences, as well as how our brains are wired, and that can be through our genetics as well as through our experiences. And I think that's what also makes life so incredible and really like the power of curiosity, the fact that we've all had such diverse experiences, that we have different wiring, we experience the world in different ways, we
Right.
think about topics in different ways, we have different emotional responses to things. And to me, that's really the beauty of life. And I think that it totally makes sense that any experience that you have, there's a certain level of imprinting that happens in your mind, and then that has an impact on future thinking and decision making. And I think it's relative to the how powerful those experiences
Right.
are. So in the case of trauma, those are often quite powerful, strong experiences, and I think they can really have an impact on how people think, how they act, their emotional responses, how they're triggered, and even how they may interpret their environment, or experiences with other people and things that are said, and yeah, all kinds of things like that.
Right. So another thing that you said, I have so many questions here, is about curiosity. So being a person that's very open and curious, I wonder what blocks curiosity. Why do so many people, instead of becoming curious, they become angry or they start judging? So what is the I wonder what's happening there.
Yeah, I love all your questions. I think one of the ways I kind of look at this is when we're children, we're all naturally curious. It's just flowing, right?
Yeah.
And you can tell by the questions that kids ask. You can just watch them in the backyard or in the house, wherever it is. They're constantly trying to figure things out, and they're thinking deeply, and just really, I think, leading truly in the most kind of organic way with curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think that what happens is that the education system, I think, educates us out of being curious. And there's this amazing TED Talk. I think it's one of the most watched TED Talks of all time by Ken Robinson, and he talks about this topic. And I think that also, in many ways, reduces our ability for sort of like direct transmissions and creative expression. And
Right.
I think this is even more so kind of inhibited by when we start to ask questions in school. Teachers have a really difficult role because, they have a classroom of 25, 30, sometimes 35 kids or more. and it's impossible to be able to communicate with that many kids asking
Right.
questions. And so often there's frustration and emotions come up, and there's efficiencies that need to be sort of had in those situations. And so often I think people have been shamed for asking questions, and that could be a teacher, it could be a parent or a friend or whatever, like the stupid question. And then I think that also, questions are really one of the best technologies that we have,
Yes.
but really directly connects to our ability to lead, to experience curiosity and lead with it, and tap into it. And when we're shamed about asking a question, then we're hesitant. Questions will come into our minds. I feel like that constantly happens, but then we're hesitant to ask the question. We feel like, oh, people will
Right.
think it's ridiculous, or they won't like it. They'll think it's stupid. And so then that also reduces our ability to improve the skill of asking questions, because it actually is a skill, being able to ask high value questions, and something we can just keep getting better at throughout our lives. So I think it's really the way that we've been educated. And
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of reading in and around indigenous ways of knowing and being. And it seems to me that that when you compare and contrast, that curiosity is not inhibited in that culture, and it flourishes. People are continually interacting with, in indigenous ways of being with nature, and curiosity is encouraged and cultivated. So I think there are alternative ways to educate children, to really
Right.
allow curiosity to flourish and lead with it, and it's so important, because I think that when we're truly leading with our curiosity, we're more deeply connecting with people around us. It's easier to listen. It's just more natural to be able to listen to somebody when you're genuinely curious about what they're saying. And I think it feels amazing when you're leading with curiosity. It's just so fulfilling, and it's almost like you could spend hours just in your neighborhood or backyard, just going around and looking and
Oh, yeah.
thinking and questioning, it's like you don't need all this modern technology to keep you satisfied. And you can get that in your environment right around you, if you're able to lead with curiosity.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Actually, also the idea of seeing the same thing, being able to perceive reality in a fresh way, in a different way. Sometimes I look at people like my family members and I don't really see them with the constructed ideas that I have of them. But it's just like I see beings just trying their best, especially the body. There's something about I could call consciousness that's always focusing on, with compassion, like if he or she could know a little bit more about themselves, and that they would be probably happier people, healthier
Yeah.
and happier. So
Mm.
I just kind of hear this observation in my mind a lot of times when I'm looking at things with the same eyes, but from a different lens, perhaps a different way of angle of perception, perceiving reality. It has been interesting to play with curiosity. And it seems also like curiosity is the antidote of fear, right, Jeff? It really comes across that way too. The more curious I become, the less fearful I become too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Looking to understand. Have you made that connection as well?
Yeah. No, definitely. Definitely. I feel like, fear, hesitation can really hold us back from engaging in opportunities that are right in front of us, that could be transformational in our lives.
Yes.
And if we're curious, often that means we're willing to learn, we're willing to gain a new insight. And when that starts to be the focus of our daily actions and our way of being, we're less concerned about outcomes, and we're more focused on learning, because learning activates neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and all these things, and it makes us feel great. And so I feel like that's kind of part of the challenge, is that in life
Ah,
we become so focused on outcomes, and then that defines our level of happiness or contentness or fulfillment. But if because we're innately, we are all evolving, our brains are constantly rewiring. Novelty is wired into our brains, but there's different
Right.
sort of levels of novelty as well, right? I would say, like, if we're just going online and we're seeing things, and we're kind of in some ways being quenched by what we see in social media with novelty, but it's not as fulfilling as when you're leading with true curiosity, and you're being intentional, and you're learning, and
Yeah.
sort of constructing in your mind, and sort of building on what's already there, in a meaningful way. And so I think that it's sort of like we all can get on that path, right? Of sort of, instead of looking at outcomes as defining our level of happiness, we focus more on learning, and that is never ending. That's limitless.
Right. 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 Gosh, yeah. A billion yeses to that truth. Yeah. Because something happens, and that's my own experience. Every time I learn something, it seems like joy arises. I become instantly happy. That's
Yeah.
interesting. And I know one way to learn, well, we need the skill of paying attention, right? Concentration. So that's another thing which I kind of, my guiding principles are coming from spiritual understandings, ancient spiritual understandings. So it's always being in the moment, being here. That leads to kind of paying attention, focus on what's in front of me, being present to what is present. That leads to learning something. For that reason, it seems to me that joy arises, and peace too, a sense of peace for some, yeah, for some strange reason, peace also rises.
Actually, one thing that you just said, like on the focus part, maybe just to kind of illuminate that a little more, is I think it's focus is one of these things that we feel it's like elusive, like it's like, oh, we're either really good at focusing or we're really bad at it, and then
Yeah.
it will never change, kind of
Yeah.
thing. Especially if
Yeah.
we're bad at it. And it's like, oh, I'm so distracted. How would you describe yourself? I'm very distracted. My focus is all over. And someone with ADHD, I can totally relate to that. But I would say that we all have this capability to. I think focus is also a skill, and something that we can
Yeah.
practice and get better at. And so, for example, and I think actually a big part of it, I think, is that to tune into what happens in our minds when we try to focus. So, like, for example, if I have like this pen right in front of me,
Yeah.
and like I'm normally just, write with the pen, put it down, whatever. But like I could look at it and say, like, oh my God, like look at all these design features on the pen, right? Like there's just like a lot of shapes and a lot of like, right? A lot of sort of like, patterns and all of these things. And I start looking at it,
Yeah.
but if I look at it, I'm like, okay, it's interesting. But I also could say, wait a moment, when I was looking at it, all the other thoughts in my mind just got squeezed out, right? And I was just focused on the patterns there. And it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And what I've realized is that when you sort of start to think like that, when you realize that when you purposely focus on something and the other thoughts get squeezed out,
Yeah.
that, and you start practicing that, you actually get better at focusing. You get better at noticing the nuances around you. Like, outside, like I never used to focus really. And
Yeah.
now I do. I practice it, and now I see the birds are like playing with each other, and the squirrels are playing with each other, and they're, the squirrels are looking at the birds, and the birds are looking at the rabbits, and like, I sort of notice all these things that were always there, but I never
Yeah.
focus my attention on it. And now, because I'm deliberately trying to pick up on the nuances, deliberately trying to improve my focus, I'm able to read longer than I've ever read before. And it's like I've been able to, even with ADHD, I've been able to improve my attention over time by making, sort of finding practices and rituals to engage in.
Right. So, do you also relate this idea of focusing, or the, let's say, the quality or how much we can focus by what we are interested in? The more interested we are in something, the more curious we become and the more focused we become.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think, generally, people with ADHD, just as an example, they tend to be able to hyper focus on the things that they're most
Yeah.
interested in. So not just a focus, but really a heightened level of focus,
Yeah.
where they may be able to see things that others don't see, or retain a high level of focus for a longer period of time. So, can then form deeper imprints and things like that.
Yeah.
And so part of it, I think, is that, I used to think, okay, maybe, almost like shame myself if I'm not focusing on things I'm not interested in. But in some ways I feel like it's like important to discover what you're most interested in and to then focus on that, right?
Right.
And because the
Right.
more you can focus, because not everything is of equal interest to everybody, and I don't know if there's any single person that's equally interested in everything, although I certainly feel like I'm interested in a wide variety of things.
Yeah.
um, but I think that's also part of it, is like, it's like this self-discovery of figuring out what you're most interested in and then trying to gradually take steps so that you're filling your day with those things.
Right.
And then also being open-minded to, there's probably limitless possibilities you're not currently exploring that you probably could be interested in. And so
Right.
that could be a fun adventure to try to figure out what those things are.
Yes, that's beautiful. That part of self discovery, right? Just navigating our own internal reality and outside reality, bringing them together. It's just amazing. It's fascinating. The experience, the human experience. I just have been fascinated by it since I was very little, already kind of very much interested in the big picture of this, asking deep questions. What am I doing here? Very young, as a child. How did this happen? And in all these questions. But of course, it has evolved now since all my practices and my spiritual understandings. And with that in mind, gosh, Jeff, I have so many questions to ask you here in front of me. Do you have any spiritual views of yourself in life itself? Do you call them spiritual at all? Their connection to nature, for example.
Yeah, I definitely, I mean, where I'm at right now in terms of spirituality is I feel like there is a life force, that is
Yeah,
everywhere.
yeah.
And I feel, I, I believe I'm a very spiritual person, and that and I feel it's an evolving thing. Like, I don't feel like it's sort of like a binary yes or no. It's sort of like
Yeah.
this, it's evolving because I'm trying to evolve it, right? And so, for example, one of the things I do when I walk the dogs is I'll cycle through my senses when I'm outdoors, and I'll say sight, and I'll look at like the texture of the bark on the trees, and
Mm,
I'll look at the tops of the trees and the clouds, and then I'll say hearing, and I'll listen, and I'll hear the birds rustling, and other sound, the birds singing, and all these sort of sounds, right? Like the leaves rustling. And then I'll say touch, and I'll feel like the clothes on my skin and my heels hit the ground,
yeah.
and I feel like I'm sort of, it's a way of connecting with what I'm experiencing, right? And it's like resensitizing my senses, I'm resensitizing my aliveness.
Yeah.
But all of these practices, I feel, become deeper because and I'm also focusing my attention, right, at the same time. And so I find like I'm able to shift by doing this. I'm able to shift away from this chatter in my
Yeah.
mind, the negative self-talk, and I'm able to be more present. And I've heard, kind of over and over again, okay, be present, be present. But I feel like it's like, well, what's the process to be present, right? Because to me, it's like, I don't want to hear be present. I want to hear, here's how you here's how you can try to be present. And I know, like, a lot of people say, okay, practice your breathing. But I also, when I've practiced breathing, I've realized that there's a number of breathing techniques that work really well, and there's others that work less well. And I needed to figure out which are the techniques that really work the best.
Right.
And so I've practiced breath work as well, and have found certain types that I'm just like blown away by. I mean, it's like these incredible experiences. And so I feel like it's like this, I'm on this sort of gradual path,
Mm,
very spiritual path, where when I eat, I'm also thinking about the energy from the sun, and I'm thinking about the energy of photosynthesis and the farmer's hands. And like, I'm getting my mind is going to these really wonderful places of thinking about the interconnections in life and how all the things that needed to happen for this food to get to my plate. And
Yeah.
I feel the reason why I feel it's spiritual is because I'm not relying on any other person. It's a self exploration that is sort of opening up my mind to all of these possibilities of how I can engage
Uh,
in this like incredibly positive experiences just by sort of focusing my attention in different ways.
yes, yes, yeah. That really makes a lot of sense to me because that's one of the things that I hear over and over again too, that consciousness recognizing itself.
Hmm.
And of course, the exploration of that, the investigation of that. It's very scientific, though, from that perspective. So we do a lot of meditation, contemplation, reflection, and a lot of observation on
Yeah.
this, on yourself. So you are your own scientist in a way. So that's, well, I'm a student of Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, which is a Hindu philosophy of knowledge. It's a spiritual philosophy. So very ancient too. So that, for some reason, caught my attention because it's very scientific in the sense of investigation. So we don't believe in anything unless we experienced it. We have to be
Mm,
sure that makes sense to our kind of relates to our experience. It cannot be something, there's no gaps or no guessing. So it's fascinating how science and spirituality, they kind of come together in that sense.
yeah. Actually, one quick thought just on that topic. So, science, so I'm a scientist, right? I mean, I trained as a scientist
Yeah.
many, many years, and that, I run a research lab, and we do science. I think about science all the time. I would also say, but as someone who kind of also likes to step back and observe and sort of think about things from different ways, I would say that science it can help
Yeah.
to facilitate the spiritual journey, but it can also inhibit the journey as well. And I think that, so for example, I know like there's a certain spiritual leaders like Eckhart Tolle and others, who talk about,
Right.
if you go and see a flower and then you try to identify, okay, this is a rose, this is a tulip, this is so it's like in science, we're always trying to identify something and then make that it almost it's like almost like that's the end, like, oh, we
Mm,
figured it out, there's no more left to do, right? And Eckhart Tolle says, if you see the rose and you say, okay, this is a rose, all of a sudden, like, it's like you were so into it, you were so admiring it, but now it's just a rose. And so a friend of mine said, that children,
mm,
they'll look at birds and be, wow, these are magical creatures, and then someone will come along and say, well, that's a bird. And then so as soon as you think of something in a defined way, it somehow loses its magic. And so I think science can uncover the magic but also can inhibit the magic. And so, yeah.
mm. The more I know, or I have an idea of what I am, I have no idea who I am. So all those parts of me, I have no idea what this is, the mind body complex, but I do know that everything is interconnected, and I do know, and I don't even know who knows that. Because again, we go back to having this center, somebody here that knows something,
Yeah.
which is amazing when you come from that perspective too. That if they are parts, then who is thinking? Where are these thoughts coming from? So you pretty fast we come to realize that we are not in control of thinking of thoughts, that they just
Yeah.
appear and we just choose them for whatever reason. So it's amazing, it's just fascinating, the whole journey of being a human.
I'd also say, just one thing on that. I mean, there's so many things that you're saying that's like, I'm like, wow, there's like all these thoughts that I don't think I've ever had before. But like, where it's almost like, I think when you commit to mind expansion, right? It's almost like you're allowing yourself to let go of the ground that you're on, right? Like the constructs,
Yeah.
the boxes that you
Yes.
put things in. And so that can enable you to really be on this incredible path of discovery, but it also can be challenging because you're not on the ground, right? Like you haven't, like, so it's
Yeah,
almost
yeah.
like you, and then you start to realize that everything is like everything that we think about, we've kind of put into a box, like we've made a construct out of it, and it's not an absolute reality. It's just the reality of the moment in your mind to help understand and explain and feel grounded.
Yes.
And I don't know, I feel that that sort of place is just really interesting, kind of connects to what I think you're saying about, where are the thoughts really coming from. And because we can live our lives within these really defined constructs and
Yeah.
feel like reality is this, like that's it, there's no other this is the reality. And but then we also, I think it's hard not to then judge others because we're using that reality to compare and contrast everything around us. And it's really hard to be open that
Yeah.
someone is experiencing something different than us. We want everyone to experience the same reality as us so we can connect with them, because connection feels amazing, right? So, but anyhow, just like, yeah, it's such a fascinating place to be.
Right. So now it's more like freedom itself, just being in this moment present to what is present here with showing up, but not really trying to change it. I think that's the main thing. It's just
Mm,
kind of flowing with it, using
yeah,
one of your words. So, speaking of that, I would love to talk about the life ignition tools. Some of them I know, I think there are 12 of them in your book. But talk to me about the main purpose to write this book. So, lit life ignition tools, use nature's, I love that you have the word nature there, use nature's playbook to energize your brain, spark ideas, and ignite action. So,
yeah.
the main purpose, what did you have in mind when you wrote this book, Jeff?
Yeah. So, well, I struggled a lot in school when I was younger, from undiagnosed learning differences, and attention deficit disorder,
Yeah.
and pretty significant. My second grade teacher wanted to hold me back to repeat the grade. I was a C and D student, kind of just squeaking by,
Yeah.
and so I needed to develop, in order to survive, all kinds of tools and strategies, and to focus my attention, to be able to be persistent and to practice, to feel good about what I was doing, instead of just sort of living the labels that teachers were giving me,
Right.
calling me like a lost cause, and wasn't going to amount to anything, and troublemaker, and all sorts of things. So I needed tools to sort of navigate that and survive. And then eventually, as I was developing these strategies, I started to.
Yeah.
My mom went up against the school board in the seventh grade and got me identified, which for having learning differences, and that gave me some special accommodations, like a little extra time and space. I started being able to then not just use tools to survive, but use tools to thrive and develop new tools and strategies. And so
Yeah.
Lit is all about sharing those tools and those strategies. And when COVID actually hit, the book was focused more on productivity and this unintentional pause that we all experienced.
Yeah.
I started to realize that the book needed to shift as well. And so I shifted the book to intention from productivity. And so rewrote the book, and then also included interviews from 40 other people, including social justice leaders, an indigenous leader, an environmental activists,
Yeah.
various scientists and CEOs, Olympic medalists, and Nobel Prize winners, astronauts. And so, yeah, so lit really is, to me, the purpose of lit is, it's to share insights and strategies and tools and inspiring stories,
Yeah.
from a wide spectrum of people in society who have learned to live their life with intention and sort of have been on an evolving, kind of iterative path. And so the hope is that this can, anybody in any particular moment, this could be a way that lit is almost like on ramps to help infuse fresh energy, um,
Mm.
to help people deepen their everyday experiences, and help people to see possibilities that they're not currently seeing.
Oh, I love that. Yes. It's very clear to me, yeah, the intention of your work. And it does sound very spiritual. It's from every angle that I look at it. When you speak of intention, I was wondering if that you connect that with purpose. Is that are these two concepts connected? The idea of having purpose in life by having by carrying intentional actions?
Yeah, it's a great thought. I think I think about I don't know. I guess like it's more of like a personal kind of definition, and I feel like maybe I need to think about this more to have a good answer because
Yeah.
I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes I interchange them, intention and purpose. Sometimes though, I feel like maybe um, but that purpose is more of a at the moment this is purposeful, whereas like
Yeah.
intention is maybe connecting with something like core that never changes, like it's sort of like a consistent kind of, it's just it's there for eternity, and you're connecting with something that is like kind of fully aligned, whereas maybe you do something that is
Right.
purposeful in the moment. I don't know. That's just the thought that's coming to me right now. But I think both are important, and I in some ways it's almost like whatever way somebody looks at it, it's to me it's kind of, it's about how do you get more aligned with what is really sort of your core wisdom and your core, what your core is really sort of. And I feel like it's one of these things where
Uh,
it's so hard today to do that because there's $900 billion with a B spent on marketing and advertising to hijack our attention. And that's like per year, right? Like there's this unbelievable force, and those algorithms are essentially telling us what we should deem important and what
right.
we should deem as purposeful and or intentional. And so it kind of clouds our ability to sort of peel the layers back and be able to look within and say what truly is most important to us. Because to me, that's like, whether you call it purposeful or intentional, to me, that's more like the process, right? Of sort
Uh,
of being able to look within and say, this feels right. This feels really good. This doesn't feel good. And sort of making decisions based on that.
yes, yes, yes. That makes a lot of sense to me. It goes back to the idea of knowing oneself. So, self knowledge, that's so powerful. I think the word that comes to mind too, the concept of truth, being true to you, but that it's another journey, isn't it? It's another process, as you said. Everything's a process, it seems to me. That's one of the things that you mentioned about the 10 transformative insights in your book that I saw on your website. One of them, 5, says that energize your life by reconnecting with what truly matters to you. And the interesting thing that you use the word reconnecting. So in a sense that we have lost already connection with it. And then
Yeah.
now we're just going back trying to find that again.
Yeah.
So, and you're saying that's because of the media and all the marketing. Yeah, it's too many distractions. That is very much true. Do you think that's because we are trying to, the reason why we get lost in distractions because we are trying to connect? Is that really what we are trying to do with all these social media platforms and engagements that we create?
I think so. Yeah. I think that these platforms are very smart. There's a
Yeah.
lot of effort behind them to understand human psychology and basic human needs. And these platforms are tapping into, I mean, because it's, decades and decades of marketing and advertising and developing algorithms
Right.
that can hold our attention, or that can quickly move our attention from one thing to another, that can move us to buy something, that can move us to think that our lives will be better if we do X or buy X,
Mm.
to make us feel like we need to, get as many likes, or even hit the like it's like, oh, if I don't hit the like button on all my friends' posts, like they're going to see that, or or if they see it, they're going to, think of me, and like there's all these things, right? And I feel like it creates a big distraction for us, and a lot of fog. It creates brain fog, and it just makes it difficult to navigate and to be intuitive and to
Right.
connect with the cues. I feel like we're constantly getting cues from our interactions from other people. And then the other thing I think it's done too, is technology, just all these conveniences, is that it's made it easier to work for longer periods of time and to do things back to back and to not take breaks. Like when we, like, say you
Yeah.
have a meeting and then you scroll on social media, like that's not really a break. You're still stimulating your mind, and you're still like all sorts of neurotransmitters and things are going off and you're activating biology. So you're in an activated state.
Yeah.
And so I think that's also creating, it's exhausting our mental resources for the things that are most meaningful to us.
Yes. Something else that you said about nature. So I love the part about nature to lean into nature to access your most inspired creativity and connectivity. And that has to do with the Nature's University, the Geoversity. I never heard about that. So I was really curious about their vision too. It says to create a world where humans fully embrace our unity with nature. I would add as nature itself, right? Because we are not apart from nature, we are nature.
Right. Right.
Wow, and you're part of that. How wonderful that is. I was just kind of picturing, looking the website and what they have created already. How amazing, Jeff.
It's incredible. Yeah. I just had the great sort of privilege of meeting Nathan Gray, who founded Geoversity with a number of his
Ah,
colleagues and friends several years ago. He actually co-founded Oxfam America, and then he moved to Panama, I think it was about 23 years ago. And he found this rancher's land in the middle of the jungle.
oh,
That rancher's land is kind of like the worst thing you can do to the land because you cut the trees down, you burn them, and then you put cattle on it. And, in the middle of the jungle, it's like the cattle don't even do that well. They're not well taken care of. They're all almost, super thin and you can see their bones and things.
mm,
So what he did is he found a way to procure a huge amount of land there. And then together with indigenous tribes and local community, he planted 500,000 trees and restored the rancher land to primitive jungle. And
amazing.
it's in the mountains. And so trees can influence rainfall. So the clouds started to form more, and then the rain came back and the river started flowing. All the biodiversity came back. And now he set up a campus in the middle of the jungle, which is only like 2 or 3 hours from the Tucumán, Panama City airport. But you rent a 4x4 and drive through a few rivers, to get there. It's pretty exciting, like, journey to get there. But
Yeah.
there's this amazing campus there. And there's a pool that's fed by a river. And there's like this amphitheater where they've had like multiple Grammy Award winning artists play. And Jane Goodall's been there a couple times with her Roots and Shoots program.
Wow.
And there's just, it's the goal of it is to have people come from all over Panama and also around the world and have transformative experiences in the jungle that will stay with people throughout life and help to cultivate an interconnected mindset, to really help to develop,
Yeah.
more sustainable ways of being in every sense of the words.
Yes. You mentioned that plants in nature, they all lean towards the sun. Like in my room, and I love the way you said that too. Somewhere on your website, I found you said something about, be in touch with nature, even if it is in your own house. Like I have
Mm.
plants in this room, and I always talk to them. I always touch them and I talk to them, and they all lean towards the sun, right? The window here. And of course, I pay attention to that long, long ago. But when it comes to humans, what is our sun? What would I'm wondering what the metaphor would be, yeah,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we would lean towards too. I know the body does that too. It loves the sun, but the physical sun. But yeah, talk to me about that because I have my own ideas here. But what comes to mind for you? What's your sun?
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, I think first of all, I think it's such a great question for everyone to contemplate and think about, and maybe that answer changes, throughout life and through experiences. In this moment, I think that the sun for me is really, it's interacting with other people. Like I feel like the way I sort of think about it right now is that, you know, we have the energy from the sun, and there's other sources of energy as well, but that's like, you know, a major source. And then, you know, that powers photosynthesis, and then photosynthesis powers all the animals, including us.
Yeah.
And then there's the exchange of energy between all of those, you know, between all of the beings and all of the things that the beings create, right? And so, you know,
Mm.
we there's certain people we have in our lives, or people that we meet, where the energy transfer is very visceral. You can really feel it. It feels good. It feels really great. And so to me, that's a big part of the way I see my son, right? Is sort of like
Yeah.
it's the people that I really feel that energy with. But I would also say that I think the life force that thrums through the universe and through all of us. I look at, like, you know, curiosity as part of the life force, and love and
Yeah.
creative expression and and learning, you know, all of like the evolution. And I sort of see that we can tap into those things on our, like, as individuals, and that is also part of our sun that fuels us, that
Mm.
gives us energy. And it's like we could be on a desert island and be able to tap into a lot of those things and feel the energy, feel fueled. So I think it's a combination of kind of within as well as, you know, externally.
Yes, yeah. Well said. It's very clear to me that it's almost like a transmission, a transference. There's something, of course, that happens in nature. Everything's connected. So there's nothing that's really disconnected. So, yes, yes. And now when I think about it, in that sense, for me has been always truth. I always want to know. For some reason, that has been my son. Regardless of even feeling connected with others, the most important thing is truth. What is true about this? Or in starting with this life, what is true about this reality that we are experiencing now? So that's my son has been, and I
Yeah.
think you always will be, the big picture, really,
Yeah.
of what this is. But yes, it's beautiful to see everything, how everything is connected, because the deeper I go into that kind of metaphoric sun, it shows me that, it's just one foundation. The essence of everything is one. It's not
Yeah.
two. So that's powerful.
You know, one of the things I also just kind of reflecting on something you just said, and really kind of
Yeah.
centered around truth, is that I've realized through my scientific endeavors
Oh yeah.
that there's really a truth of the moment, right? And that, because in science, it's like something gets discovered, and then that becomes the dogma, the new ground to say this is the way it is, you know, like
Yes.
the universe is expanding, right? Like it's like we make those bold statements, and then what happens is new tools are developed and discovered, and, you know, peer around corners you couldn't peer around before.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you realize, oh my god, it's the opposite of what we thought was happening.
Yes, yes. That's the beautiful thing about scientists that I really love, because you people committed to truth. So you want to find the truth, and you're okay about letting go of whatever relative truth that you found a moment ago, to embrace a new one that's proven to be,
Yeah.
let's say, to make sense more than the other. So that's the same thing with spiritual seekers. That's what we are interested in, truth. And you're right, absolute truth and then relative truth. The world is just, it's so fascinating. But I'm interested in absolute truth. That's one of my
Yeah.
my big son. So yeah, I want to mention something else before we say goodbye for today. Your mom's poetry, I saw that on your website. Summer Air. Oh, it's just so beautiful. Talk to me about that. Like, is
Yeah.
she writing a book, putting a book together with all her poetry?
Yeah, yeah, she is. She is. So, you know, my mom's always been a, you know, my biggest cheerleader, supporter, and,
Yeah.
you know, really went to bat for me when I was younger, and prevented me from really falling through the cracks. And in the last several years, she's really gotten into poetry. I think she's written like 200 or 300 poems or something like that, and just her creative expression just flowing.
Yeah.
Because the book came out, and I was able to put a website together for it and stuff, and I thought, okay, what better way to have my mom be part of it, and so
Yeah.
I suggested, hey, why don't you post some of your poems? And she was really excited about it, and so I'm hoping to kind of change them up every once in a while, and allow her
Yes.
to sort of whatever poem she wants to post there, she can do that.
Yeah, she has a space. I
As a
love that.
space.
When I saw that, it was just it's very kind of you honoring her, her
Mm.
creative side. It's beautiful. Poetry is so beautiful. So I want to mention again the book. So your book, Lit Life Ignition Tools, it is on Amazon, all formats, audio too, and then Barnes and Noble and Target as well. So I just saw on your website. So I'll have the links here. Will be on the podcast notes. So thank you so much again, Jeff. I had so many other questions here for you, but we'll be here. I mean, I would be with you forever, of course. I love all of this.
Well, I'm happy to continue this conversation too. Yeah, this has been really
Um,
amazing, and I love how this has been so mind expanding for me. Like just the questions you've asked, many have never been
uh,
asked before. So it's like they're. I love that. So thank you for that.
yeah, thank you for being open. Really, thank you so much. So your website is jeffcarp.com. And before we say goodbye for today, I would love to meet you again too. So I'll ask you this question. What is your idea of freedom? What is freedom to you?
Yeah. Wow. To me, freedom in this moment is it's deeply connected to evolution. And so I think of
Yeah.
if I'm not free, then I'm sort of in a box. I'm limited, inhibited. And so my sense of freedom is the freedom to engage in new possibilities and to
Mm,
have expand my mind and to connect more deeply with things and to allow my mind to flow into areas it hasn't been before,
mm,
and to to learn about things that I've never learned about before, and just to have that ability to just kind of swirl,
yeah.
and let things kind of unfold in all sorts of different and unique ways.
Mm. Gosh, it sounds like poetry to me. Like listening to you, it's beautiful. I'll tell your mother that you actually would be good to write a poetry book too. You're good
Yeah,
at it.
yeah.
It's beautiful, truly beautiful the way you speak. And I know it's where it's coming from. It really feels true. Thank you so much again for your presence, and we'll talk soon. We'll be in touch again. Bye for now,
Thank
Jeff.
you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yeah, I
Thank
love
you.
this conversation. Thank you.